Welcome to the show. We're diving into some heavy hitting discussions on Europe's geopolitical game, particularly how the EU seems to be getting drunk on its own lies, if you know what I mean.
Yep, right. It's like there's this recurring theme where Europe has abandoned its own interests to sort of play into a larger, global power scheme.
Exactly. And the debate really kicks off with how Europe's idea of strategic autonomy has turned into this hollow slogan. It's almost as if they've been blinded by an idealized narrative rather than a realistic appraisal of their geopolitical footing.
Absolutely. It's like, are they even in control anymore? I mean, the discussion points out that the so called strategic autonomy has masked a dangerous dependency on external powers, right?
Right, and then you have the angle on the French political scene. The piece touches on this political deadlock in France, which severely influences Macron's foreign
Yeah,
policies. Basically, France's internal fractures are spilling over into broader European strategies.
and that's where it gets even funkier because you see how that deadlock not only weakens domestic decisions, but it also forces France to serve as a pawn in this global chess match.
Exactly. And then there's the issue with how a childish good versus evil narrative has like taken over.
Right.
Instead of pragmatic statecraft decisions, Europe's letting itself be seduced by oversimplified narratives that frankly do more harm than good.
Yeah, it's almost like one would expect a continental power to engage in realpolitik, but instead we get this a sort of moral high ground that completely ignores military realities.
Exactly, and that disconnect is at the core of the critique. It's saying that while the elites, their rhetoric sounds lofty, talking about European globalism and moral superiority, they're, well, disconnecting from the gritty realities of geopolitical strategy.
Yep. And right there, you can see the cracks. I mean, if you're increasingly relying on broad ideological slogans, you're essentially ignoring historical lessons.
Exactly. It's a bit like when you keep reusing the same blueprint for a structure that's crumbling, you're going to run into disaster. And speaking of structures, the video also breaks down how the Minsk Accords were more of a masquerade than a solution.
Yeah, right. The Minsk Accords here seem to be portrayed as a political tool that was meant to create peace, but in practice ended up, well, only serving as a comforting lie for an unprepared Europe.
And it's interesting how the discussion also brings up the inherent conflict between the French military's approach and the political leadership's stance on
True.
Russia. That contrast really underpins the broader point of a divide between strategic reality and political rhetoric.
Precisely. And wouldn't you say that this disconnect almost invites criticism on one level? I mean, it's like, how can you expect a bloc to defend its interests if there's no unified strategic vision underpinning its policies?
Exactly. And that brings us to the crux of the issue. Europe's lost strategic autonomy. It's kind of self inflicted. The continent's chasing after some sort of grand narrative while sacrificing the very autonomy it claims to seek.
Yeah, exactly. That point about dependency really gets me. I mean, one could argue that the EU's bureaucratic power grab is only adding layers of red tape that, instead of unifying the bloc, further alienates member states from making quick, decisive moves.
Yeah, it's like they're busy overcomplicating governance with this intensive bureaucracy, which ironically stands in stark contrast to, well, the actionable strategies needed during a geopolitical crisis.
Right? And it almost reminds me of a scenario where you have someone who's so focused on micromanaging every detail that they lose sight of the big picture.
Exactly. And no, wait, because here's a moment where I must respectfully challenge that view. While bureaucratic procedures are, yes, clunky, could they not also serve as a framework to ensure mutual accountability among member nations?
That's a good point, but isn't the reality more nuanced?
Right. And then we have this fascinating concept of Europe's moral superiority complex clashing head on with military reality. It's almost ironic that while Europe preaches high morals, its military might, or lack thereof, paints a completely different picture.
Yeah, it's like two sides of the same story. Absolutely, and that dichotomy is so stark. Now, adding another layer to the conversation is the idea that Europe is heading towards its own hangover. We're talking about a sort of wake up call where the continent will have to deal with the repercussions of its sentimental politics.
Right. So imagine waking up after a long night only to realize you've overshot your limits. That's what's being compared to Europe's predicament, a hangover from years of ignoring pragmatic strategy in favor of
Exactly.
ideological appeal.
And when we discuss these historical shifts, it really is um, striking how reactive Europe's policies seem. Like instead of learning from history, there's this repetitive cycle of making the same mistakes over and over again.
Yeah, that's a critical part of the critique. The content suggests that Europe doesn't adequately learn from history. Instead, it clings to a sort of naive optimism about its ability to reform itself without fundamentally changing its strategic
Right,
approach.
exactly. And what do you think about the concept of European globalism as described in the content? It almost sounds like a ideological project that's lost its way amidst bureaucratic entanglements and unrealistic ambitions.
Yeah, it's like they try to position Europe as this global bridge builder, which on paper sounds great, but in practice it becomes kind of an overblown exercise that misaligns with the continent's actual capabilities.
And isn't that where Europe's dependency on external influences creeps in? As if trying to assert globalism makes them all right with being, well, led by external forces rather than being truly autonomous?
Exactly. And it's the message is clear. By overplaying this globalist card, Europe is essentially diluting its sovereign interests.
Yeah, I see that. Interesting point there. Now, as we zoom out a bit, there's also this subtext about how Europe's elite are divorced from the reality that the public is beginning to see. The disconnect, you might say, is growing.
Absolutely. It's like there's a growing awareness among the populace that the lofty rhetoric of strategic autonomy and global moral leadership doesn't match with what they experience or see on the ground.
Right, exactly. And the irony isn't lost on many. While the elites project an image of unwavering superiority, the realities of military capabilities and fast changing geopolitical scenarios are far more complex and challenging.
Exactly. And what makes this conversation so engaging is that it challenges us to rethink what being a major power truly entails, beyond slogans and moral claims.
I mean, there's this thought if you keep dancing to the tune of outdated narratives, eventually you're going to miss the beat of, well, reality.
Precisely. And maybe that's the big takeaway. Europe needs to ground its policies in a more pragmatic and realistic assessment of its strengths and vulnerabilities, rather than chasing after a grand but, well, unsustainable image of itself.
Yeah, I agree. Now, a question that still lingers for me is can Europe ever recalibrate its strategy in time? Or is it, destined to be caught in this cyclic trap of grand illusions versus realpolitik?
That's the million-dollar question. It seems that unless there's a major recalibration where the elites start listening more closely to the realities faced by the military and the public, the cyclic inertia might just lead to more serious repercussions down the line.
That's a fair challenge. And while some might argue that Europe's current course is merely a transitional phase, others fear it could spiral into, a kind of strategic paralysis.
Exactly. And that potential paralysis might ultimately force a painful awakening for the continent, one where the cost of clinging to unsustainable narratives becomes very, very real.
Right, exactly. Well, it's been really enlightening dissecting these points. The discussion shows that beneath all the debate and high rhetoric, there's a pressing need for Europe to bridge the gap between idealism and pragmatic strategy.
Absolutely. And as we wrap up, it's clear that the conversation isn't just about empty slogans. It's a call to rethink and reframe European policy to ensure that the promise of strategic autonomy isn't just a another lie that Europe gets drunk on.
Yep, couldn't have said it better. Thanks for joining in on this. It's been a fascinating journey through the complexities of European geopolitics. Until next time, keep questioning and stay engaged.
Thanks everyone for listening. And remember, it's our collective vigilance that ensures we don't remain blinded by lofty promises over reality. Catch you all next time.